Hello, everyone, and welcome to the KWIB Monthly Spotlight. This is usually run by Debbie, but I just wanted to take a quick minute to introduce myself and then also introduce our speakers today. I think you all are here for a good program, a very relevant program to the times of today, and I'm very happy to introduce our speakers. But first, to anyone that I have not met before, my name is Alishir Bariknoff. I am the new Executive Director of the Kentucky Workforce Innovation Board. I'm very happy to be here. Right now, a lot of learning and a lot of visiting and talking, and I see some KWIB members here on the line. Thank you all for joining the conversation, and I think this is the monthly spotlight that Debbie has started doing. I think very relevant information to the statewide audience. With that said, you all can always reach out to me. I welcome visits. I will be visiting many areas and talking to you all, so reach out anytime. But with that, let me welcome our speakers today. We have Susan Hopkins, and then we have Reagan Wan. Both are excellent individuals, and the information that they will deliver today is also very relevant. Susan actually was a big person to put on the live event, Bridges Out of Poverty, here recently in Lexington. And then we have Reagan Wan, who's actually a trained and certified professional in Bridges Out of Poverty. And Bridges Out of Poverty also comes with a book that could be referenced, and I'm sure it'll be talked about. But with that, Susan, I'll turn it over to you to kind of start things off and then pass it on to Reagan.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Alishir. My name is Susan Hopkins, and I am the College and Career Navigator Coordinator for the Kentucky Office of Adult Education. And I guide the work and training for about 65 College and Career Navigators, or CCNs, as we call them. These folks are responsible for recruitment, retention, referral of our adult students, and they help us meet performance measures for the Federal Perkins Leadership Grant and for the WIOA funding that we receive. So we work very closely with adult learners, helping them overcome a number of non-academic barriers. So they have instructors that help them, prepare for the test and that kind of thing. But our folks really kind of help them focus on wraparound services that they may need. So a lot of you may know the Office of Adult Education. We previously were known as Kentucky Skills U, but Kentucky Adult Education, most people will say, oh yeah, you guys are the ones that help people get their GEDs. And so while that's true, and that is a big part of what we do, we also have a number of other services. We help with English as a second language. We help with family literacy. We help with U.S. Citizenship courses. We help employers learn to skill up their employees if maybe they need workplace literacy training. Maybe they need to learn about an integrated education and training program. If they want to look into some pre-apprenticeships for their employees, we help do all those kind of things as well. So as you might imagine, our adult population has a lot of different challenges, maybe than from what you would see with the traditional student. Maybe it's mental health issues, maybe it's transportation issues, elder care responsibilities, all of that. And so they do as I said, again, the wraparound services for students. And so a number of our students do live either at or near the poverty line. And so thinking of that, I had an opportunity back in the spring to go to a facilitated one-day workshop of the Bridges Out of Poverty content. And I was really just kind of blown away by the content and really intrigued. And I'm sure Reagan is going to talk about the hidden rules of class in the Bridges Out of Poverty, but that really struck me, and I could see a direct correlation between the work that our college and career navigators are doing with students and the content. And so I thought, well, this would be a great way for our folks to really kind of better understand their clientele, right? So that they could better serve that population. And so during my years, I've spent the majority of my career in higher education and post-secondary financing, that kind of thing. I'd always heard the name Ruby Payne, but I had never had an opportunity to participate or, be in a session that she attended. So fast forward to this past October, the Kentucky Office of Adult Education put on a summit. We called it the My Story Reimagined Bridges Out of Poverty Summit. And I know Alashear, Reagan, several folks participated in that event. It was kind of a split event. We had about 200 educators and partners that participated and learned directly from Ruby Payne and the Bridges Out of Poverty curriculum. We also had about 25 students that came, and they had a separate track where they learned, heard from motivational speaker Hassan Davis. Reagan was there to talk to them about all the resources that the Kentucky Career Center offers. And then they also heard about financial literacy and paying for college from the folks at the Kentucky Higher Education Assistance Authority. So it was a great event. Education and Labor Secretary Jamie Link was there. Dr. Kish Price was there. A number of our different dignitaries within the cabinet and partners were there to talk about the program. So the day was great. We did a survey of the respondents. 65% of the folks said it exceeded their expectations. But the real thing that really made me happy was that 88% of the people that we responded, that we surveyed, said that the summit significantly improved their understanding of people who live in poverty. And one particular respondent said, I feel better equipped to understand the values and thought patterns of people living in poverty. I now understand why they make the decisions that they make, and that motivates me to help them serve them better. Another respondent said that this should be a required workshop for anybody who teaches in public education. And so lastly, 99%, which I'm going to take that as a win, is said that they would attend another summit that the Office of Adult Education put on. So I'm not sure how we're going to top that with the summit next year. Ruby Payne is a rock star, but we're certainly going to try. And I see our executive director, Dr. John Gregory, is on the call. Dr. Gregory, would you like to add anything about the summit, or do you have any comments?
No, ma'am. There's nothing that I can add to that process. Susan, as well as so Summer Morgan, they did all of the heavy lifting. So it was nothing on my part. That entire process was a fantastic success. Not due to me at all. I think I even maybe have detracted from the process, but they did a wonderful job. And I think we served the folks in Kentucky very well. So thank you very much.
So, okay. So that's all I have, unless anybody has any particular questions. And I see Debbie, thank you for saying that it was a wonderful event. We are pleased with the feedback that we've gotten. We do look at having an annual event. Obviously it won't be Ruby Payne every time, but it will be a summit where we will bring together partners and students. And so we're taking a breath from the October event, and we're getting ready to kick up and start working on the next event for next fall. So if you have thoughts, ideas, suggestions, shoot them out to me. We'd love to hear them. Okay. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Reagan.
Fantastic. Thanks, Susan. So hello, everyone. My name is Reagan Wan. I am the Director of Trainer for the Career Development Office over here in Education and Labor Cabinet. We are all under the same umbrella. We're all part of the same family. And I have recently returned to the state after being away for 4 years as a one-stop operator. I was one-stop operator for the Kentucky and Works region. But when I was with the state, previous to that, so this is my second time with the state, I was given the opportunity by the then commissioner to become lifetime certified as a Bridges Out of Poverty trainer. And I was really excited about that opportunity, and I've used it just in all the work that I've done. And my first introduction to Bridges Out of Poverty was actually in the career before my workforce career. I was a professor in the community college system. And when I was there, we did I think it was an 18-month commitment. It was longer than a year to do Bridges Out of Poverty as a faculty and staff. And at that point in time, that was mind-blowing to me. It was my first introduction to Bridges Out of Poverty, and it changed how I looked at the population that I taught. It even changed how I interacted with the communities that community colleges tended to be in. I worked on the Carrollton campus. So there's a very specific population that lives in Carrollton. A lot of the work that we did in Bridges Out of Poverty was informing how I moved forward working with the community that we were attempting to serve as a community college. So I've been a dyed-in-the-wool believer and fan of Bridges Out of Poverty for many, many, many years. And in 2018, when I got the opportunity to become a lifetime certified trainer, I jumped, and I have been really excited to be able to provide that to a wide diversity of groups. So when Susan came to me and said that her focus for the Office of Adult Education Summit was going to be Ruby Payne, and that she was actually going to speak, first of all, I was like, can I come? But then after that, also, I was just excited to be part of the conversation and also to hear other people's responses to what happens with Bridges Out of Poverty. So in talking to Debbie and talking to Susan some, I'm like, well, I'm here. And one of the things about Bridges Out of Poverty is that once you become a certified trainer, it's kind of like community service. Certified trainers don't make a living off of being Bridges Out of Poverty trainers. They offer those services for free. So I am a resource for you and for basically anybody who asks. So anybody who wants to do a deeper dive into Bridges Out of Poverty, I'm happy to be a resource for you, and I'm happy to help. But what Debbie asked me to do today was kind of like a snapshot overview of what the heck even is Bridges Out of Poverty. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen. I will say, I know from experience, because I'm on my laptop and I don't have extra screens in the space that I'm in today. If anybody has comments on the chat, I won't be able to see them. So if somebody can unmute and let me know that there's a question or a comment, I'm happy to stop me at any point in time. This is stuff I know well, so it's easy for me to pick my train of thought back up. But right now I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and let's see if I can make this happen correctly.
And Reagan, I've got you covered if any chats show up.
Thank you. Okay, hang on. All right. Can you see a full screen of Bridges Out of Poverty? Okay,
yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Yay, Debbie's here. So Bridges Out of Poverty, the way that it is framed is a model for supportive transitioning. And what that means is that typically, and again, I'll talk about this more, so I kind of get ahead of myself sometimes, but it is literally the image. This is from a previous edition of the book. The new edition has a different cover on it, but this is a previous cover. And I like this one because it is the indicator that it is taking multiple people to make the bridge function. And that is kind of the keystone, if you will, following the metaphor, the keystone of how Bridges Out of Poverty works, that it is a recognition that poverty in and of itself is a spectrum of experiences and a spectrum of challenges. And that additionally, it takes multiple steps and multiple resources to bridge into something beyond poverty. So I always like to start there because it's not one thing. And that's the challenge with Bridges Out of Poverty as a process as well, because it's a process and it's ever changing. There's no one right answer. There's no silver bullet on this one. It is a process, it is a spectrum, it is an experiential reality. And this Bridges Out of Poverty, Ruby Payne herself frequently says, this is not a solution, it's not a program, it's a resource, and it is a framework. It's a way to think about the work that we do and the services that we provide within a framework of those that we serve, so that we can provide better services and make our work more effective and feel better for us, so that we know why we're doing what we're doing and why certain things work and why they don't. The first thing I always like to do is to just take a quick minute to talk about poverty. And you'll see there are some images that are trademarked in here. I am a certified trainer, so I have the right to use them, but also you can find a lot of this stuff just out in the wilds as well. So if you are curious about this, I'm going to give you the formalized resources, but you can also find a lot of these just because it's good information and you might want to explore it as you're deciding whether you want to go deeper into it, but I'll give you lots of resources as we go. So poverty, it's important to remember, it's a spectrum. It's not any one thing. It's relative. It functions differently, whether it's generational or situational, which I'll talk about more in a minute. It is not an excuse. Nothing about Bridges Out of Poverty says that being in poverty therefore excuses you from participation in society. It doesn't excuse behaviors. It helps give a framework for understanding behaviors, but it does not excuse behaviors. So lest anyone have any thoughts that this is somehow trying to make it seem like X, Y, or Z is completely appropriate and we just have to live with it. That is not the framework that is developed by Bridges Out of Poverty. It is saying, understand what is happening so that you can give someone the tools to bridge into where they want to be. It's not static, it changes. And even within, like, even if certain aspects of your resources don't change, like they remain static, you can change within your reaction to your own situation as somebody living in poverty. And it is also not an indicator of being deserving or not of services. And in the introduction to the Bridges Out of Poverty book itself, that is discussed, where there are entitlements out there, and that term entitlement has taken on some new engagement in recent years. But there are entitlements available, like tax breaks, that are available that would not be considered on a deserving or not deserving scale because they don't tend to tie to poverty. But the language of poverty frequently ties to somehow being deserving or not deserving of support systems. And this framework attempts to pull out of that concept. I won't spend a ton of time on a lot of slides. I'm keeping an eye on time because I know I don't have a huge amount of time, but I think it's important to talk about what poverty is. And in light of that, it isn't just one thing. And in fact, Bridges Out of Poverty identifies poverty as 11 unique identifying factors. And you can have one or more. And most people who are experiencing poverty, like genuine functional poverty, are experiencing multiple of these resource lacks. So it's not just about money. You can have no money, but be rich in all the rest of these and not function as if you're in poverty, even though you live below the poverty line. You can also be living above the poverty line, but be lacking in the other 10 resources. And functionally, you are very much below the poverty line, even though on paper you are not. So it's not any one thing. And this list has developed over the years. I feel like the first time that I did Bridges Out of Poverty, it was at 7. I think it just went up to spiritual at that point in time. So it was financial, emotional, mental, cognitive, language and formal register, social capital and support systems, physical and spiritual. And then over the years, as the research has continued, and keep in mind, Ruby Payne is a doctor, she's a professor, and continues to do research in this realm. This is a social cognitive therapy program, sorry, not program, but framework that was developed within her program. But as they've learned more, that's where integrity and trust, motivation and persistence, relationship and role models, and the knowledge of the hidden rules has really come into play. Now, hidden rules has been talked about all along, but it was added as its own unique resource lack. Along the years, it was separated out from I think originally it was under language and formal register. So again, I'll talk about this more. And if you decide to go deeper into Bridges Out of Poverty moving forward, you'll see all of these and kind of do a deep dive into these. But these are all the things that make up poverty. And if you have all 11, if you are lacking in all 11 resources, you are very much struggling in this world. So one of the big things that Bridges Out of Poverty talks about, and it's what they talk about first because it's very, very key, is language. And understanding what language we use, what language we are using to engage with the customers that we serve, what language we are using with each other, and why does it matter? Well, in large part, it matters because there are patterns of discourse that are also tied, and I think it was Susan that brought up the hidden rules, which are coming here in just a second. But there's language that we use to identify where we are. So an example that I have frequently used with this is if you are on your way into work in the morning and you slide on rain and snow and ice, and you're in an accident and you're okay, but the car is totaled, right? There are probably at least 2 or 3 phone calls that you're going to make while you're waiting for the tow truck to come, while you're waiting for somebody to come pick you up, et cetera, et cetera. And if those 3 phone calls, if you think about who they are, and usually I do this as a discussion, but we don't have that kind of time today, so I'm going to go very quickly. But you're going to call your insurance company. Probably, maybe not on the side of the road, but in this example, you've got time to wait. So you're going to go ahead, you're going to call your insurance company. You're going to call your significant other or your best friend, like whoever it is that's going to come pick you up. And you're going to call, maybe you're going to call the tow truck, right? The register that you are going to use for each of those conversations is going to look different. So let's say that you're calling your best friend, you're going to be like, girl, you're not going to believe what just happened. Oh my God, I slid right off the road. There was a cow over there. It was watching me. Blah, blah. You're going to use this very casual register where you're going to go in this circular fashion where you're talking about what happened. And then this happened. And then, I had been it had been 30 seconds before I'd been talking to my grandma about her accident the other day, blah, 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 blah. It's very circular. It's very fluid. It's casual. It's not just casual in definition. The type of language, the register of language that you use is very casual, and you might use some expletives. You might use inside joke language. You're going to use very informal language. The minute that you call your insurance company, you are not going to be like, girl, you're not going to believe. You are not going to do that. When you call the insurance company, you're going to be like, hi, this is Reagan Wan. I just had an accident. And I'd like to go ahead and report this. And you're going to be very formal in that register. Okay, so I can say that. And all of you, if we were in a room, you'd probably be nodding your heads at me. You recognize that's called code switching. And you recognize that code switching is a thing. We all do it. We all know to do it, but we don't always talk about it and pull it out. Well, one of the big things about being in poverty, and especially if you're in generational poverty, where multiple people in your family have had multiple things from that 11-point list that was in the previous slide, you may only have casual register as part of your discourse. You may not have been trained in formal register. You may not know how to access it. And then the minute that you enter the workforce or you apply for a job, or you try to go to college and you walk in the door and you're like, look, let me tell you, this is crazy. Like all of a sudden you are in a different realm where you are not being professional. You are not being appropriately formal. And that can very much impact your ability to succeed. If you've never been trained on it, how would you know what formal register is? Because formal register needs to be taught. And it very specifically exists in the realm of work and education. That language, formal language, is very much a language of middle class and above. And we don't always think about that, but school and education, school is education, work and education are experiences of middle class, very much. Casual register is the primary discourse of those we serve. And that exists in all of the human interactions that they're having. And therefore, it can be difficult to understand how to code switch and why you would need to. This I'm not going to go over, but there are 5 types of code switching that we do and 5 types of registers in language. Formal is the second most formalized. Actually, frozen is something that you recite by rote. But we exist most often in formal and casual. When you enter into intimate, you're getting into a different realm. So within this framework, the 2 that are talked about most are formal and casual, and consultative is a variant of formal. The 2 are, one of them is interactive and one of them is in writing. The other big piece of this framework is hidden rules. And hidden rules are those things like, if you are in a workplace and the expectation is that everybody, let's see, I heard this quote the other day. Well, if you're not 10 minutes early, you're late. Okay. That may be how you were raised. That may be what your experience in life has been. You may be shaking your head at me like, no, Reagan, that is not how things work. What are you talking about? I'm always 10 minutes late. All of those things are true. But if you are in a workplace where the culture of that workplace is, if you're not 10 minutes early, you are late. If you don't clock in on the top of the minute, you are late. If you're not aware of that rule, it's a hidden rule. And if it's a hidden rule and you don't know that it's there and you don't know to look around and ask, which many of us don't. I mean, how many of us have been in a social situation where we thought we understood how to behave and what we were doing and blah, 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 blah. And then somewhere along the way, we recognized we were in out of our depth, or there was something going on that we did not understand. I will give an example of that from my life going a different direction, because within the framework of Bridges Out of Poverty, there are 3 basic identifying factors for class. And again, we're going to talk about that here in a second, but there's poverty, there's middle class, and there's wealth. And those are the 3 big buckets that we use to fill in. And there's a lot of gray area. There's a lot of sliding back and forth between them, but those are the 3 big buckets of class that we kind of talk about within this framework. And I was invited to a gathering of genuinely wealthy people that were, someone had property out in my county. I live in Henry County, and they had invited me to a fundraiser gathering. And they invited me because I was knowledgeable about the organization that was doing the fundraising and the topic that they were fundraising for. So I was just there as like flavor, right? Like to talk to people, to have good conversation, to get people excited about the fundraiser and the topic. But I do not have good register for, and I don't code switch easily into wealth. I've spent my entire life firmly between poverty and middle class. Those are my 2 realms. And I can slide really easily between poverty and middle class, no problem whatsoever. But sliding up to wealth is tough for me because I've been lower middle class at the best of times. So all of a sudden I found myself in these weird blunders where I was like, I don't know what I said. And it was because I was talking about things wrong, that you have to like talk about who you know, and you have to talk about knowing the people that those people know. And I didn't know that. I was just talking about, you know, the basics of what we were there to talk about. And it turned out okay. Everybody was nice, but those were hidden rules. I did not recognize that the way you make a connection to people as you slide into wealth is by pointing out who you're connected to within that circle of wealth. We have tons of those in middle class because we, and all of us in the work that we do are middle class. Wherever we fall, this work, social engagement work that we do falls firmly into middle class, and it all ties to education and work. Therefore, it's all clearly in that middle class. And the language that we use and the hidden rules that we have can actually make it very difficult to bridge into what we do if we don't provide guidance about those rules where possible and help people understand how they start utilizing those rules and why they're there. Driving forces of class are a big part of that. So poverty is heavily driven by relationships. Now we're going to hit upon something interesting that some of you may seen here, may have already seen. I can talk, may have already seen here, but relationships and connections, which if you're looking down at wealth, that's where connections are. I've bolded both of those, seem like they're the same. They are not. They're similar, but not the same. And within this framework, it helps you understand, Bridges Out of Poverty will help you understand what the difference is between those, because poverty is very much driven by survival and entertainment and the relationships that you have, level of trust, things like that. Middle class, we are all about work and achievement. Like, what's the first thing at any work gathering, social gathering where you're interacting with peers that happens is they ask you, what do you do for a living? Where do you work? What, where'd you go to college? Those things all live heavily in the middle class. And that's what we tend to talk about a lot, are those tools of middle class. Then within wealth, it's all about your financial, political, and social connections. And all these three are not separated by asterisks because they're all one thing. Your financial connections, your political connections, your social connections are the primary driving forces of wealth and the language around wealth. Middle class in particular, I always like to talk about because that is heavily where the work lives in Bridges Out of Poverty, is trying to bridge into middle class. Very few people are trying to bridge straight from poverty into wealth. And even bridging from middle class to wealth, it's a whole, it's not that it's not within the work, it's that most of what we're trying to do is bridge people out of poverty and you go to middle class first. So most of what we need is based on middle class. And this is where education, training, and work all live. So it becomes really important in relationship to what we do and the services that we provide to the communities in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So how do we bridge? Well, this is going to be a real fast, quick dive, but the framework, the Bridges Out of Poverty tool, basically talks about the various different pieces that we have to help bridge. And as folks that offer services to the public, these are the primary keys that are the pieces that we would use. So role modeling and providing emotional resources is one. Social system engagement. Now that one is a big one. It's a big umbrella, but where we fit into that are things like having a Kentucky Career Center, having a center that offers those GED courses, but also says, hey, did you know we can also help you get your citizenship? Did you know that we can also help you do this? All of the resources that are available through a government kind of fall under this because we are the support system for the general population, and engaging with that support system in meaningful ways and understanding how to help people navigate those hidden rules and how to use the language that gets them the support services that they need and are eligible for can be really meaningful and very difficult for someone, especially that is attempting to come out of poverty. Like if you're the first person in your family that ever in remembered history has gone to college, transitioning into college, even applying for college, you need someone to help engage you with the support system to figure out how to do that college application, right? It's not going to be straightforward. Mentoring is a big one. So role modeling is one thing, mentoring is another, and also helping to connect with mentorship. Discipline, choices, and consequences. This is where that poverty is not an excuse. If you have someone in front of you that is genuinely trying to bridge their way out of poverty, they have to find their way to connect with these hidden rules, with making the language work more effectively, with understanding what the expectations are to get the outcomes that they say that they are after. And that comes along with having discipline, the choices that you make, and the consequences of those choices. Because here's the hard and true fact. When somebody is attempting to bridge out of poverty, frequently they're doing it as an individual, not as a family, not as a whole family unit. And it means that they're going to lose some of those relationships, if not all of the relationships that have been the thing that has sustained them and allowed them to survive up to this point in time. It's very difficult. It's why many people don't step out of generational poverty. Situational poverty, most folks that are in situational poverty, which is like, I have been laid off, therefore I am in situational poverty, I'm having trouble finding a new job, I've lost my car, I've lost my house, what have you. Frequently, those folks, not always, but frequently, they have fewer lacking of those 11 resources that we looked at earlier, and therefore are able to see the bridge, even if they can't make the bridge. But also there are consequences there as well. Like, well, you may have to live in poverty for a while to be able to bridge back out to get to where you need to go. So identifying what those things are, where do you need discipline? What are your choices? And what are the consequences? What are the potential consequences for that? And then also the internal asset resources. I know that this group has definitely heard of GRIT. And
What?
I'm
So
sorry.
when we think about the,
Oh, no, not a question. Okay. But I know that this group knows about grit, determination, internal resilience. Those things are very much part of this conversation, is who has it? How do they get it? How do they...
a business,
Is there a question?
criminal conviction.
Okay, I'll take that as a no. I'll keep going. All right, so these are kind of the primary pieces that start to build the bridge. And then also there's a deep dive in Bridges Out of Poverty that goes into each of the ways in which you can be under-resourced. There's 11 things that we looked at the beginning, and how those function and how you engage with them.
Possession
whoops.
of marijuana in 1978,
Oh my goodness.
or
Okay.
So yeah, I was going to say, Stephanie Collins, do you have a question for Reagan at this time? Okay, go ahead, Reagan.
Okay, thanks. So the other thing to know about Bridges Out of Poverty is that they look at this framework through what they call the triple lens, where there is what is happening, the framework, the lens of the individual, then the institution, that is us. We are the institutions that are that middle lens, and then the community. And frequently there's a flow between these three lenses, right? Like, and it's like, looking through three panes of glass, each one adds a layer, right? And sometimes you're looking through one, sometimes you're looking through another. So sometimes you can be at work, but something comes up that is related to your community, and you have to take your work hat off and think through your community hat. So each of these lenses can be laid on top of one another. They can be pulled out individually. They can be put together in different ways. And then the overarching framework for those is policy. And what is happening that creates the framework, what is happening that affects poverty, what is happening that are the support systems. That policy is what support systems are you eligible for? An example for that would be in 2020 and 2021, when the unemployment insurance definition, like eligibility for that, got way expanded during that time. And now it's coming back, but the policy umbrella that was over all of these people, places, and things changed. Therefore, the lenses changed a bit in how we were looking for it, but that policy change is what allowed the triple lens to be viewed differently. And so there is an aspect of like, how is this all put together that goes along with Bridges Out of Poverty that can help you as someone working in a governmental agency, for example, understand how policy impacts both the individual, the institution, and then also the community as a whole. This is the new cover, which I think it was Susan that held this up before. This is the new edition of the book, Bridges Out of Poverty. It's a wonderful resource. I highly recommend. The company as a whole is called AHA Process. And I'm telling you this because here in a minute, I'm going to show you some other resources. She has multiple frameworks within the framework. Ruby Payne has developed a really lovely, diverse approach. So there's like, there's an aspect of it that focuses on the individual. So a Bridges Out of Poverty that is actually about being an individual in poverty, and that is the audience it's aimed at. Bridges Out of Poverty, this particular book is really aimed at us as service providers. That's where this comes from. So are you an educator? Are you a service provider? Are you a social worker? What are you? That's where this book is aimed. There's also one that's aimed at corporations. And then there are a couple of other framework building books that help to engage this population in more meaningful ways in new and untapped areas that are looking to engage and help people bridge out of poverty. The thing that I love most about Bridges Out of Poverty is that it's highly adaptable to your needs. So once you identify who the audience is, any trainer, whether it's me or somebody else, should be able to adapt your needs to the framework and to provide what your focus is going to be. So you can do long-term or short-term engagement. Like I said, my first engagement was 18 months long. I'm pretty sure. I know it was more than a year. And we just committed to saying, we're going to do this and we're going to engage deeply. We're going to get together once a month. We're going to do all these things. And that was amazing. Not everyone has the time or resources to be able to do that, because once you do look at something that's longer than like a 2-hour framework, Ruby Payne does request that you purchase the book and invest in the resources so that you're using the most up-to-date information and getting the full access to those resources. But any trainer can work with you on developing what you most need for the group that you're trying to serve and the audience that you want to serve. There's lots and lots of resources and tools out there. It can be aimed in any direction. It can be aimed at those you serve. It can be aimed at your staff. It can be aimed at leadership. All of those work. And there are a multitude of approaches. And so I'm sharing this because if you go to their website, and you can engage with them on social media as well, but if you go to their website, you can see the full series of books. There's a bunch, and how they utilize this framework in different settings and what the approach is to that. It's a nice website. It's intuitive, easy to access. And then the last thing that I have to say is, this is me. I am a resource for you. The Career Development Office, we are all about partnership, because the Kentucky Career Centers are our biggest purview, and that is all about working with all the partners statewide in the state of Kentucky. So I'm happy and delighted to be able to offer myself as a resource for you if you're interested in learning more, or if you'd like to do this with your staff or your participants. Happy to help. Debbie, it's all back to you now.
And I finally got my audio working, so I apologize for the technical difficulties up front. Team, you can imagine this. So this part of the framework is an abridged version, as Reagan mentioned, but to really deep dive into this is incredible. I had the privilege of being there for half a day, and it actually was like a day and a half full of content. So please do reach out to Reagan, reach out to me if you didn't catch her information. We'll make sure that we promote her presentation on our homepage, as well as this recording if you want to share it with others and get the word out. So thank you, Reagan. Thank you, Susan. Thank you to Dr. Gregory. And we do appreciate all that you do in this ecosystem. Certainly, and for all the folks on the phone, thank you for your time and just your passion to try to make things work better for all that are out there. I do see that our chair of the KWIB is on. Chair Minke, would you like to say anything in closing?
Well, first of all, thank you. This is exactly the type of information sharing that we intended for these kinds of gatherings that just whet the appetite for learning more. So Reagan, thank you so much. Your passion is just unbelievable. And so thank you so much for that. And, you know, I learned a lot today, just really challenging the way that I think about things. And I hope everybody else had the same takeaway as well, that expanding the way we look at our work and the way that we need to address those issues to make a better Commonwealth. So again, thank you for your efforts today. And Debbie, thanks for setting these up so that we have these opportunities.
Wonderful. And I see that Susan came off mute. Susan, would you like to add anything as well?
No, just thank you for including us. We're glad to be a part, and a shout out to Reagan. As I put in the chat, we've used her for a variety of different trainings. She's awesome. We always get great reviews. She's very engaging and interactive. And so if you need a trainer, she's your girl. So great job, Reagan.
Thanks, Susan. And I did not pay her to say that, so thank you for saying that. I put my email in the chat, and Debbie, I will send you an email with a PDF of the PowerPoint so that people can look at it in their own time. It was a ton of information, and it's got my contact info too.
No, that's awesome. And look, she even gave everybody 14 minutes back to chuck down that sandwich if you weren't like me off camera eating yours. So have a blessed day, everyone. Thanks for what you do. And thank you so much, Reagan and Susan, for joining us today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.